If you think you are somebody that is not creative, then I'm going to challenge you to think again. Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Nicole Pignola Show. It's me, Nick, your pocket neuroscientist. Today we're going to be talking about how to rewire your brain for genius level creativity. I hear way too many people that say, oh, I'm left-brained or I'm right-brained or I'm creative, therefore I couldn't, or I'm too logical, therefore I couldn't. Now, here's the thing. We debunked that left brain, right brain theory ages ago. We actually have creativity and logical thinking residing on both sides of the brain. We have something called the central executive network, responsible for logical thinking, problem solving, etc. And we know from the research that it resides on both sides of the brain. And so it is with creativity. Creativity resides on both sides of the brain. So yes, some of us are more creative. Yes, some of us are more logical, quote unquote. But the brain is plastic, and these networks are highly malleable, meaning that if you want to become more creative, you can. Now, are some people natural born Picassos? Yes. Are some people more naturally logical? Yes. But can we become more creative? Yes. Now, here's the other thing. Does creativity reside in logical thinking? Yes, because creativity isn't just unbridled emotions and throwing yourself at a canvas. Creativity also requires you to be calculated, to think about what it is that you want to do, to plan. Not always, but there is some level of planning involved. And so creativity can also be logical. And in logical thinking, you also need to come up with creative solutions. So I'm challenging what we see as creative and logical because really they work hand in hand together. I have a friend, Sophie, who's an incredible artist. I could never do what she does. And I'm a scientist. She could probably never do what I want to do. I mean, we could both do what the other person does if we really applied ourselves, but it also comes down to passion, like what it is that you want to do. If you wanted to become a scientist and you're an artist, you could. If you wanted to become an artist and you are a scientist, you could. Will I ever be as good as Sophie? Probably not, but that's fine because I will be different. I'll be my own version of an artist. And that's the point I'm trying to make here, is that we can absolutely change our brains to become more creative or become more logical if we wanted to. Now, psychologists define creativity as the ability to generate novel and thoughtful ideas that are useful. That, to me, could be a new business model or it could be a new melody. It's just that we've categorized creativity into this idea that we need to be knitting or making music, and of course that is creative, but creativity also lies within business, as an example. Like Steve Jobs once said, creativity is just connecting things. And neuroscience tells us that that is exactly what the brain is doing. So hopefully I've opened up your world. You are somebody that wants to be more creative. Now here's the how to do it. I'll start by explaining three brain areas, three brain networks. I already alluded to two, the central executive network, which is responsible for problem solving, etc., more logical thinking. And then you've got the default mode network, responsible for internal mind wandering, creative thoughts. Have you ever wondered why you get some of your best ideas when you're in the shower, when you're doing something mundane like driving on a long road that you know well, not in traffic, when you're washing the dishes, when you're folding clothes, when you're just doing the most mundane chore? That is because you have activated the default mode network. Now, the problem is that we live in a world with constant distraction and we're constantly looking for inspiration outside. Now, there's a fine balance between, yes, getting inspired by the work that is around us and in self-generating that inspiration from the inside. How often do you sit without consuming? When last were you bored? Now, here's the other thing. When I wrote Rewire, there was a really interesting thing that happened because I remember pottering around a lot, not really ever doing anything. And I kept feeling very guilty, thinking, Nick, you should be sitting down and you should be writing. Why aren't you writing? Until I realized that actually the best ideas are generated from me just doing the gardening, doing anything else but the writing. Now, of course, there's a fine balance because then you have to be able to translate that. You could see me sometimes running down that garden. I know exactly what I'm going to write about. And I'd sit down, I'd quickly jot it down. And then when I was kind of more in my logical state of mind, I would then sift it out and add and get into the nitty gritty of that deep flow where I'm sifting out the idea with some science and logical thinking. But the creative idea came from me doing anything else but the thing. And the point I'm trying to make here is that sometimes we're trying so hard to come up with that creative idea that we actually are consuming too much information and we're thinking about it too much. We're not allowing our creative mind to be active. our default mode network. Now, here's another theory that I have, and I can't yet quite prove, but stick with me because I think the creative artists are going to love this. We spend too much time in central executive functioning. And so when we have to go in the default mode network, it's like a world that we don't access enough. Now, the more time we spend in there, the more we allow ourselves to go in, the deeper those thoughts become, the bigger the ideas become. And so it quite literally requires you to spend time in nature, spend time in solitude, spend time creating, drawing, doing mundane chores. If you're somebody that maybe engages in activities like puzzles and doodling, etc., that is where your default mind is most active. You're not going to get those creative ideas scrolling social media. They'll be inspired by somebody else. If you want the most authentic, creative ideas to come from you, you need to sit by yourself. You want to access that world that you don't normally access enough times. Now, you will access that world when you meditate, when you do things like breath work, but you can also activate that part of the brain by spending enough time in that default mode network, whatever that means to you. Now, the third network, which I was going to talk about, was the Salience Network. The Salience Network attaches importance to particular thoughts and ideas. The more time we spend attaching importance to the outside world, other artists, other creatives, other content creators, we start to get used to seeking ideas from these people. The more time we spend attaching salience and importance to our own internal world, the better we become at relying on ourselves to self-generate those ideas. Now, here's the other thing. Your entire brain database is built on everything you've ever experienced, and it cross-references this information. We have something called combinatorial explosions, meaning that there is an infinite amount of information and combinations of ideas that we can come up with based on everything we've ever experienced in our life. We have an unlimited amount of generated ideas in our brains, just waiting to be accessed. Get really good at trusting yourself through that Salience Network, attaching importance to your own ideas and believing in yourself. Because oftentimes that creative idea comes up and then we start to scrutinize it. How else can we access creativity? You want to be in a lower brain frequency. What that means is that your brain needs to be calm. You want to be in a place that's maybe serene. There is research to show that when we are sitting in big cathedrals and rooms that have big windows, we are more inspired with creative ideas versus if we're sitting in a cubicle. It is the reason why when you go in for a UCAT exam, and I still have PTSD from that exam, or an MCAT, or whatever kind of aptitude test that you have to take to get into university, they will put you in a quiet booth with your sensory experiences all blocked out from the world. Because that confinement creates a divergence in the pupils, it creates a divergence in your periphery, and that periphery gets you to focus more. It puts you in a deep flow state. You don't want that when you're trying to come up with creative ideas, and that is why big windows and outdoor spaces can be more engaging for the default mode network and can actually inspire bigger ideas. And it is not a coincidence that you get a lot of creative ideas when you're outside in nature. And this is exactly why, because your brain is vibrating at a lower frequency. It is also the reason why you get creative ideas when you're meditating, when you're doing breath work, when you're about to fall asleep. Can you resonate with that? Because I will lie in bed sometimes and I'm like, oh, genius, I know exactly what I'm going to do. And I have to get up and I have to write it down. So you might want to leave a little notebook next to your bed. Anytime you come up with that idea, write it down. And then you can go to sleep, or you might get it first thing in the morning. And that is because your brain waves are at their lowest frequency. So now I'm gonna leave you with 6 tips on how to rewire your brain for genius level creativity backed by neuroscience. Tip number 1 is to leave a journal next to your bed. So when you are in those low theta brainwaves, your brain is going to be at its most creative. The portals are quite literally open. And so you want to be able to write those thoughts down so that the next day you can then get into a flow. There have been times when I've woken up at 3 in the morning with an idea and I get out of bed and I write it down because I'm writing a book. And that's fine, because sometimes the creative pursuit is more important than making sure that I'm getting my 8 hours. Of course, sleep is important, but in that moment, when I'm in that state of mind, it is really important for me to get it down. So keep a journal next to your bed, write in the evening, write in the morning. Tip number 2 is to spend time in open spaces, in nature, and in solitude without consuming. You will generate some of the most incredible ideas the more you do that. Step number 3 is to use your hands more. Studies show that when we use our hands to create, and that can be from making your kids lunches in the morning, all the way through to writing, all the way through to knitting, all the way through to pottery, we actually activate bigger parts of our brain that require us to come up with creative solutions. They activate these neural pathways that open up the portals for creative thinking. And that has been well established in the literature. Use your hands more. We use our thumbs too much to scroll. Use your hands and start to create. Spend time in the garden. Get your hands dirty. Tip number 4 is to consume less and create more. Again, you can create by gardening. You can create by drawing. You can create by doodling. You can create by puzzling. You can create by doing anything but consuming content around you all of the single time. There's a little asterisk to that statement because yes, I do get inspired by ideas looking at other people's content, but I also genuinely think that I have enough ideas. I just need to pull them out sometimes, and you will only pull them out by creating. And here's the thing. You using your hands to maybe create a puzzle is not necessarily going to be linked to the thing that you want to create, like the big idea or the song you're about to write or whatever. But by doing the activity that means that you're using your hands and you're creating in the moment, it will inspire and generate ideas for the other thing. So there's a link between those two activities. Tip number 5 is to use expressive movement and expressive music to help generate ideas. When we are moving our bodies, we start to release endorphins and we activate various parts of our brain that all work together to self-generate ideas in the default mode network. Move your body more. Maybe you can do a moving meditation or a yoga flow, or you can use music to help inspire you. I remember when I was writing Rewire, I wrote it in 2 phases. Phase 1 was the science. It was like the backbone, the skeleton of the book. And then I remember having to lift the book. I had to inspire some stories and write about, things that would make it a little bit more magical, put in some cute quotes, etc. And I remember vividly thinking I felt quite rigid in myself. And so I would do a lot of kind of dancing and listening to music and going to the beach and just kind of listening to sad music, quite frankly, to try and just peel off those hard layers. And I remember visualizing myself as an onion and peeling off the hard layers so that I could get that soft core. And I did that by doing very strange cathartic movements like expressive dancing, going on the beach by myself with sad music, and driving at very kind of romantic times of the night. I romanticized my entire life during that period to just access those parts of my brain that were less rigid. I hope that helps. And then the last tip number 6, is repetition and practice. You will only get better by doing it. You have to remove that fear, that procrastination, that resistance of thinking that it's going to come out rubbish. You just have to create, and you have to repeat, and you have to fail, and you have to repeat, and you have to do it again, and you have to keep going at it because you will get better. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you found that helpful, and I hope that you can see now that creativity is something that we can all unlock within us. I am a scientist, but I do recall writing my thesis and looking at it and thinking, wow, this is such a beautiful artistic creation. While it looks all analytical with the bar graphs and all the numbers and all the results, it was still actually so beautiful because I had to generate the idea of what I wanted to conduct in my research, all the way through to the design of the research, all the way through to making sure that I was writing about it correctly, and then also deciding which graphs I was going to use. It's actually really beautiful in my opinion. Creativity and logic reside together. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and leave a comment so that I know whether you found this helpful. And yes, see you all next week.